Before we go to the sewing machine to learn how to thread it, let's get part of our bag ready so that as soon as we are comfortable with the sewing machine, we can actually start sewing on our project. So according to the directions, they have you do the pocket as the second big step. And the first big step is huge. It's got a lot of complicated pieces to it. And I think it would be easier for us to do the pocket first, simply because this is a much more simple task to do. So we're going to go from our marking right over here to step number 7 on your guide sheet, and we're going to get your pocket ready to sew. Then once it's ready to sew, we've learned how to use the machine. It's just one straight shot across, and you'll kind of get your feet wet with sewing before we have to get more complicated. So we need to do some folding with this, and we're going to take our pins off, and if you notice, I'm keeping my hand on here because I want to remember that this is the top of my pocket. So as I open this up, I'm taking my pattern off. I took all the pins off, taking the pattern off, and this part that is away from me is the top. And you can actually, if you want to, use your chalk pencil and make a little mark up here that might help you, because that's where we're going to do all of our work. So I'm going to flip this around, and what our project says for us to do is to fold the upper edge 1/2 inch first. And we're going to use a couple of things to do that. We're going to use our seam gauge. We're going to set it right at the half. Half is halfway between 1 inch and the very end of the ruler. So I have that ready. I need some pins, and I also need my little wooden iron. Now, this doesn't look like the official wooden irons. It's half of a clippy clothespin, but we're going to use this because it has a nice beveled edge on it that we can use for finger pressing or wooden iron pressing. All right, so we need to do it 1/2 inch, and we're gonna do my method of pinning, which is to pin. I'm going to flip this back around again. We're going to pin the 2 ends first, and you want to fold this over. Use your seam gauge, and you need to measure every step of the way. So I measured 1/2 inch, and I'm going to put a pin in. And my method is that you do the 2 ends first, and then you do the middle. That's just kind of my funny way of saying how we do this. So we're going to put our pins in first. If you notice, my pins are perpendicular to the edge. I have the 2 ends done. If we start on one side and pin across to the other side, what happens is we tend to push the top layer a little bit more, and so we're going to end up with it uneven on the opposite side. And we know this should be perpendicular or parallel to the edge. So now I'm doing the middle. You need to be accurate with this. This is something that I'm checking and grading. So I did the 2 ends first, the middle. If you notice, I'm pinning back towards me. The reason why I do that is because it's much better ergonomically. It's harder to pin like this than it is to pin back like this, so that's why I do it this way. So I have the 2 ends first, and now I'm going to do the middle here. Again, I'm measuring every step. Don't just push this down and hope that it's 1/2 inch, because if you do, it's going to be wavy across the top, and that's not going to look good. So 2 ends first, middle. So I have the middle of this part, and then I'm going to put one in between each one here. Okay, and measure again. And then I'm going to measure again. Put my pin in. This is the middle of this side. And then measure, pin, measure, and pin. Now, if you notice, I folded this to the wrong side. How do I know I folded it to the wrong side? Because my tape's on this side. And remember, we put our tape markings on the wrong side of the fabric to help us remember which one was which. Now that I have my pins in, I'm going to turn it so I can get my hands closer to the pins. And I actually put my fingers on the pins to hold them so they don't wiggle around. I take the end of my little wooden iron, my little clothespin, and I just move it back and forth a few times. I'm not trying to kill it, I'm just going back and forth a few times. If you push too hard, you can end up stretching this edge, and we don't want to stretch it, but we do want to get a nice little crease in there. If you notice, I keep going straight across till I get to the other side. And if I've done this correctly, when I take these pins out, I have a nice creased edge. And that's what it's supposed to look like.